What would you do if the person who raised you stole your future with a smile? You didn't need it anyway. My father said, his voice casual through my phone speaker, like he hadn't just admitted to stealing my entire college fund. I stood frozen in the middle of my tiny London apartment, the early morning light casting long shadows across the floor. I was 25, one semester away from earning my degree, and my father had just drained the $42,000 I'd worked years to save. 4 years of scholarships, part-time jobs, budgeting, every coffee and cab ride. Gone. And he sounded like he was commenting on the weather. "How much is left?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady even though my hands were trembling. "Left none of it, honey. I had some debts to clear up." His tone didn't waver. "But don't worry, you're smart. You'll figure something out. Figure something out." As if I hadn't already done that for years. As if being responsible was a flaw he could exploit. "I see," I said quietly. "That's my girl." He chuckled, mistaking my silence for acceptance. "Always practical. Listen, I gotta run meeting some friends for drinks." Drinks. With my future. I sat down at my desk, the one facing a cobbled street I'd fallen in love with during study abroad. The city that had once felt like a dream now felt like a trap. I had 3 months left in the UK, 3 months to find a way to pay for my last year or go home empty-handed, with nothing but a mountain of student debt and a broken promise. My phone buzzed again, a text from him. "Don't mention this to your mom or grandma. No need to worry them." Of course he didn't want them to know, just like he didn't want them to know about his gambling debts, or the borrowed money from my childhood birthdays that never returned, or the failed business ventures that had left us bouncing between homes. He always kept his image intact while burying his mistakes under other people's trust. But this time, he'd gone too far. I opened my laptop, first documentation, bank statements, account history, every dollar I'd deposited since high school, every scholarship award, every withdrawal he'd made, then research, legal resources, financial aid, emergency funding, remote jobs, anything that could help me salvage the future he'd tried to erase. My father always thought I was soft because I didn't yell. He thought I was easy to manipulate because I didn't fight back, not out loud. But what he never realized was that my calm wasn't surrender. It was strategy. He thought he'd buried me. He had no idea I was about to grow roots, but I had no idea how deep his betrayal truly went. Legally, he had every right to access the account I told Emma, my roommate, as she stared at the bank statements scattered across our kitchen table. He was a co-signer. I never thought he'd actually use that against me. Emma looked at me like I'd told her I'd been mugged in broad daylight by my own family. "Your father stole $42,000, Vanessa," she said, her voice sharp with disbelief. "He didn't access anything, he robbed you." She wasn't wrong, but the law didn't care about ethics when it came to shared accounts. I'd opened it at 17 with my father's name attached so I could get started on building credit. Back then, he'd promised, "It's just paperwork, sweetheart. I won't touch a dime." I believed him. Of course I did. I was 17 and naive and still believed in fathers. Now all I had left was screenshots and shattered illusions. I didn't cry. Not then. Not when I found out. Not even when I realized I might not graduate. But that night, after Emma went to bed, I sat on the bathroom floor with the lights off and my laptop on my knees. I listened to the quiet hum of the city outside as I scrolled through financial aid forms, part-time job listings, and legal forums full of stories like mine. Girls who trusted the wrong parent, girls who got used, girls who had to start over. The silence felt suffocating, and just when I thought I could breathe again, my phone buzzed. Another message from him. "Don't stress so much. Maybe this is a sign you should take a break from school. I know some guys who could get you a modeling gig. Better money than that degree." That broke me. Not because of what he said, but because he believed it. Because after all these years, after every GPA I maintained, every hour I'd worked, every night I'd studied until my eyes ached, he still thought my value was in my looks, not my mind, not my drive, not my future. He never saw me. To him, I was just a tool, a backup plan, a pretty daughter he could cash out when times got tight, I slammed my laptop shut and curled up on the cold tile floor. For the first time in years, I felt like I was 13 again when he used to borrow my savings and say, "You won't miss it. You don't even need that doll, right?" Except now, the doll was my education. He hadn't just taken my money, he'd taken my power. And I didn't know how to get it back until one person, one message changed everything. "Called your father today," the email from my grandmother read. "He seemed nervous when I asked about your college fund. Is everything okay?" I stared at the screen, heart pounding. He was nervous. That meant he knew he was caught or about to be. I hadn't planned to tell her yet, but suddenly I couldn't stop myself. My fingers flew across the keys. "Can we talk? There's something you should know." That conversation cracked everything open. My grandmother, the one who'd taught me to write thank you notes, who used to slip extra money into my coat pockets during holidays, who'd always asked about my classes first. Not my love life, was furious. "That man has gone too far," she said, fire in her voice, stealing from his own daughter. "This ends now." We scheduled a video call the next evening. She brought in my mom and my Aunt Sarah, the only lawyer in the family. I watched their faces go from confusion to horror to rage. My mom's hand shook as she read the text messages I'd forwarded. "I had no idea," she whispered. "He told me you'd taken a break from school, that you were tired, that you wanted to come home." Of course he had. He always had a version of the truth that made him the good guy, but now the truth had witnesses. I've been documenting everything I told them, every withdrawal, every message, every call. My Aunt Sarah leaned forward. "He was a co-signer, yes, but we might have a case. Especially if he acknowledged the money was meant for school." I pulled up emails and texts. He had, so many times. Casual little phrases like, "Don't worry, I'll put it back soon," or "You know it's for your future." Perfect. Sarah said, eyes narrowing like a litigator in court. Not legally binding, but excellent leverage. That night, a plan began to form. My grandmother would call him, let him know we knew. Sarah would draft a formal demand letter, and my mom, after years of hesitation, would finally file for divorce. "He's always underestimated you," Grandma said. "Time to show him who he really raised." The shift was subtle but seismic. For the first time in weeks, I felt my spine straighten. My breath deepened. I wasn't alone. I had a team. I had evidence. I had fire. When my father called again, his tone was careful. "Your grandmother seemed upset. You didn't tell her anything, did you?" I kept my voice even. "About what, Dad, the college fund you stole? Or how little you think of my future?" Silence. Then now. "Princess, let's not be dramatic. Don't call me Princess. Don't call me at all. From now on, everything goes through Aunt Sarah. Sarah." "Why would she be?" "She's a lawyer, and you're about to need one." He thought I was bluffing. He had no idea the avalanche that was coming. "You're blowing this out of proportion," he texted. "It was just money. Family's more important than money." I didn't reply. I forwarded it to Aunt Sarah. Let him keep digging. That week, the demand letter went out, certified signature required. It listed every withdrawal, every message admitting guilt, every false promise. It gave him a deadline and consequences. He called the moment he received it. "You can't sue your own father." "Watch me," I said, then hung up. That was the last time I answered one of his calls. What came next was a slow unraveling. His carefully crafted image of the fun, generous dad began to peel away. Family members started calling ones I hadn't spoken to in years. "I can't believe he did this to you," one said. "He borrowed from my daughter's birthday fund, too," said another. My cousin Jake messaged, "Remember when he said our college money was safe with him? Guess we know what that meant." Turns out I wasn't the first. I was just the first to push back. Grandma banned him from her house. Mom filed for divorce on grounds of financial infidelity, among other things. And Sarah went to war. She discovered he'd purchased a brand new car 2 months earlier, posted vacation photos from Aruba, maintained a country club membership, still paying monthly dues. "He's not broke," she said, flipping through statements. "He's just a liar, and he's about to be held accountable." We filed a motion to freeze assets tied to my college fund withdrawals. It wasn't everything, but it was a start. Meanwhile, I transferred every cent I had left to a new bank, changed passwords, closed every joint account. My name and his would never share another document again. Through my university's emergency financial aid office, I explained my situation, leaving out no detail. The woman on the other end of the call paused before saying, "We've heard stories like yours, but rarely this bad." They offered me temporary relief and helped set up a deferred tuition plan. And then quietly, without making it about pride or payback, my grandmother stepped in. "Unlike your father," she said, sliding a check across our video call screen, "I understand the value of education and promises. I didn't want to take it, but I needed to, and she wanted me to succeed." In the following weeks, Gregory's texts went from arrogant to desperate. "You're ruining my life. This is destroying the family. I raised you better than this." Each one forwarded, documented, filed. When he tried to turn the younger cousins against me, telling them I was trying to bankrupt him out of spite, they forwarded those messages too. My file grew thicker, my resolve stronger. Every move I made was legal, strategic, calculated. He'd taught me to survive chaos. Now I was turning that survival into control. But the real reckoning hadn't even begun. "You emptied your daughter's college fund to pay off gambling debts," the judge asked, barely able to contain her disbelief. The courtroom was silent except for the ticking of the overhead clock. Gregory stood there wringing his hands like a child caught stealing cookies, his usual smirk nowhere in sight. I was going to pay it back," he stammered. "Eventually. She's my daughter. We have an understanding." "Do you?" the judge replied, flipping through our submitted documents. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've spent 3 years avoiding work, defrauding relatives, and maintaining a luxury lifestyle off other people's money. That hearing was only for the divorce, but it was the first public shattering of the image he'd built for decades. Gregory the fun-loving, misunderstood dad. Gregory the charming risk-taker. Now Gregory the thief." That same week, Aunt Sarah dropped the next bombshell. "We found the offshore account," she said, tossing a stack of printed statements on the table. "He's been funneling money for years under shell companies using fake consulting fees. So much for being broke. We sent the documents to every party involved as creditors, the university, even the court, handling Mom's divorce." Suddenly, the tone of every conversation changed. He wasn't just a manipulative father. He was a serial abuser of financial trust. Even his friends, those who had once defended him, backed away. A few called to apologize. One confessed Gregory had borrowed $15,000 from him for a real estate flip that never existed. Meanwhile, my life was rebuilding itself quietly and steadily. I'd landed a part-time job through a contact my grandmother arranged, an alumna of my university, who had once faced similar betrayal. She became a mentor of sorts. She said, "What your father did was wrong, but what you're doing now, that's power. You're not surviving, you're redirecting the damage." That stuck with me. Back home, the family was unraveling, but realigning too. We started having dinners without him. My cousins, once afraid to speak, began sharing their own stories of lies and manipulation. Even his sister, my Aunt Patricia, said he's been doing this for years. He used guilt like currency, but no more. By now, the demand letter had matured into a binding repayment agreement with interest. Court-backed, no wiggle room, monthly deductions from his paycheck. And because his schemes had dried up, Gregory had to get a real job, one he couldn't lie his way into or out of. The final reveal came from a social media post, one he didn't know I could see. He'd created a burner account under a fake name posting in a private group for entrepreneurs wronged by family. In the post, he painted himself as a victim of a daughter who turned cold and tried to ruin his life over a misunderstanding. The comments tore him apart. "You stole from her," someone replied. "That's not a misunderstanding, that's abuse." That thread was sent to our entire extended family. Silence followed, then support. He'd lost his last refuge, but I still had one final step before I could let go. The last payment hit my account on a Tuesday. $42,000 paid back to the cent, with interest. Attached to the transaction was a note, "Now can we be family again?" I didn't respond. I printed it, filed it with everything else, screenshots, bank records, texts, emails, all the fake apologies and twisted guilt trips. Not because I needed proof anymore, but because I never wanted to forget how far I'd come. I was no longer the daughter he could manipulate. I was the woman he underestimated and lost. That spring, I stood on the stage at my graduation in London in a navy suit and heels I'd bought myself. My grandmother sat in the front row, tears in her eyes, beaming. My mother held her hand free for the first time in decades. My Aunt Sarah gave me a proud nod from her seat beside them. He wasn't there. He tried to be sent messages begging for an invitation, calling my success our victory. I didn't even flinch when I read them, because my success was mine, built from the rubble of his betrayal. He tried to take everything from me, my future, my independence, my worth, and in doing so, he handed me the one thing he never meant to clarity. At my firm's annual charity gala, they asked me to speak about resilience. I didn't mention his name. I didn't have to. I spoke about what happens when trust is broken, about how sometimes the people who claim to love you most are the ones holding the knife, and how survival isn't enough, you have to rise. The crowd stood when I finished. Weeks later, he sent a birthday card. Inside, he'd written, "Still paying for one mistake. When will you let it go?" I pinned it to my bulletin board right next to my framed diploma and my promotion letter. Love isn't unconditional when trust is shattered, and forgiveness isn't owed, it's earned. Now my life is mine. My small flat in London furnished with my taste, funded by my work. My career built from late nights and unshakable grit. My name no longer tethered to his. He calls sometimes. I don't answer. He tags me in old family photos. I untag. He tells others we're on good terms. They know better. I've learned that healing doesn't always come with apologies. Sometimes it comes with silence, sometimes with space, and sometimes with fireproof boundaries. So here I am, whole, steady, free. And I have to ask you this. Have you ever had to protect your peace from someone who was supposed to protect you? Tell me your story below and don't forget to like and subscribe.